Hello YouTube. One of the strengths of the Elder Scrolls games is the sheer variety of races that you can play as, each hailing from their own province of Tamriel. But there's one playable race that does not have its own province or homeland, the Orcs or the Orsimer. As Orcs do not have a province of their own and instead have smaller population pockets around Tamriel, like in the northern mountains of High Rock, Skyrim and Hammerfell. But did you know that there's another province with a sizable population of Orcs? Valenwood, which has several clans of the so-called Wood Orcs. They are actually quite an interesting people, and today I will tell you all about them after the intro. So, the Wood Orcs. First and foremost, I need to state that the Wood Orcs are not some separate race of people or something. They are simply different clans of orcs that live in Valenwood rather than northern Tamriel's mountains. So they are really just orcs, but as orcs they have their own society and separate subculture within orcish culture, which is quite different from the culture of their northern brethren. You see, just like the orcs of the north, they value strength and honor and can be stubborn, blunt and brutish, at least in the view of the other races of Tamriel. And just like the other orcs, they tend to live in strongholds where the chief is the only one allowed to have wives and produce offspring. Although other males are allowed to challenge the chief for the right of leadership over the clan and the right to have wives, but that's the same with the other orcs. They are also, just like their northern brethren, an independent people. They do not consider themselves part of the Wood Elves' political and or spiritual order in Valenwood. They also refused to join the Riemann Empire when it conquered Valenwood, categorically raiding imperial supply lines and garrisons. And they are often in conflict with anyone in their direct vicinity, as they highly value their own independence. And also, for example, they did not join the first Altmerry Dominion, which we see in the Elder Scrolls Online, where Valenwood did join the alliance, but the Wood Orcs, despite living in Altmerry Dominion territory, then actively resisted their incorporation into the Dominion. Although they will sometimes act as mercenaries and work for others if well compensated. So far so good, very much like the other orcs of Tamriel, but that's basically where the comparisons mostly end. You see, the orcs of the north worship the Daedric prince Malacath, Daedric prince of oaths, vengeance and curses, and adhere to his code of Malacath in their lives in order to live an honorable life. Now, the Wood Orcs, they don't worship Malacath, at least not as Malacath. Rather, they worship the god Malor, the god of curses. Now, Malor essentially is just a different interpretation of Malacath, and the Wood Orcs rather see him as an Aedric god rather than a Daedric prince, which is really interesting. They also have a wildly different origin story for their god, as it's believed by many that Malacath came to be when the god Trinimach was swallowed and eaten by Boethia, who then pooped out Malacath. Now, Maulok's origin, on the other hand, states that Trinimach was not eaten. Their story is quite different, because they believe that Trinimach tried to stop and fight the Daedric prince Boethia when she tried to lead the elves astray in the prophet Veld's exodus from the Somerset Isles. It's said that Trinimach then tried fighting Boethia when Boethia wouldn't stop, and that instead of getting a fair fight, he was stabbed in the back by the Daedric prince Mephala, who wounded him severely. Wounded by Mephala's treachery, Trinimach was weakened, and in his weakened and betrayed state, he was cursed by Boethia, and that curse left him scarred and deformed, and he was then cast into fire and ash. But that was not the end of Trinimach's story, because according to their story, Trinimach was then reborn in rage from these ashes, and he sliced open his own chest, tearing the shame of loss and betrayal from his spirit. And from this torn out shame, Maulok appeared, the god of curses. And at that moment, Maulok spoke the code of Maulok for his faithful, which is very similar to the oath of Malacath, in that his oath states, do not steal, do not kill your kin, do not act without cause, and those who break the rules must pay the blood price. Now, obviously, this is very similar to the code of Malacath, and to an outside observer like us, who look into the universe top-down from our real universe, we see, wow, this is probably just two interpretations of the same god. But some orcs truly believe that Malacath and Maulok are two separate beings, while other orcs believe that they are two interpretations of the same being. Most Wood Orcs seem to be firmly in the camp of believing that they are separate deities though, and they tend to only praise and worship Maulok as an Aedric god alternative to the Daedric prince Malacath. But there are more differences between the Wood Orcs and the Northern Orcs than just religion, as they have different cultural traditions, different fighting styles, different enemies and different values. For example, a wood orc does not only value strength, but also values nimbleness and precision, as they are said to fight much like the wood elves in their fighting styles. They are armored lighter to make traversal of Valenwood's jungles easier, and they are better hunters. One of the most valued qualities in a wood orc in their society, and something they also highly respect in outsiders, is geographical knowledge of the jungles. If one can make their own way in the jungles of Valenwood and are a capable tracker, one is worthy of the wood orc's respect. Now, according to one High Elven source, so might not be super reliable, they highly distrust magic, at least when it's used by others, as magic is seen as a tool of other elves to oppress their people, and as such they are said to be slow to trust heavy magic users. That being said, they do have their own magic and magical traditions. For example, they have shamans, who can be both male and female, that practice their own closely kept secret type of magic, which apparently includes some strange dream magic. They also have their own magical rituals and knowledge of both Aedra and the Daedra, as can be seen in the recently released Valenwood expansion to the official Elder Scrolls board game Betrayal of the Second Era. In that expansion you can encounter one of the Wood Orc clans and help them deal with a magical problem using a powerful artifact and prevent their chief from being assassinated. I won't spoil the questline completely for those who still want to play it, as it's basically just released, but in it we learn that they have quite peculiar rituals of trying to bring themselves closer to Malor, which is really interesting. And I can highly recommend that you play the expansion. That having been said, despite their more nimble way of fighting that's more similar to the Bosmer way of fighting, they are very similar to their other kin in that they like to fight honorably. They don't like setting traps, they don't like trying to hide yourself from your opponent, despite the advantages that may have. And like I mentioned before, because they need to make their way in the jungle, they usually use lighter arms and armor than other traditional orcs who tend to be heavily armored berserkers. In comparison, most wood orcs are considered more lightly armored skirmishers, which is logical considering that they need to be able to quickly speed over jungle trails, which is pretty hard to do in really heavy armor. Now, talking about the jungle, despite living in the same province as the wood elves, the wood orcs do not adhere to the Green Pact, which is the Bosmer tradition of not being allowed to harm the trees of the forest. And this has often been both an advantage and disadvantage to the wood orcs. You see, the non-adherence to the Green Pact has made it so that they are often in conflict with the local Bosmer, whom they have conflicts with over territory and the treatment of the forest. But it has also caused for quite good business opportunities, as while the Bosmer are not allowed to build in the jungles and harm the trees, the wood orcs are able to do so. And as such they are able to, for example, build mines to dig for Valenwood's natural resources like coal and iron, which they can then sell to the Bosmer. In addition to that, the Bosmer tend not to be smiths due to the Green Pact, as they are often just not able to. This means that many of the metal objects that are found in Wood Elf society, like tools, weapons and war armor, are often made by the Wood Orcs who can sell it to them. And there are often enough opportunities for trade with the Bosmer, as just like the Bosmer, the Wood Orcs essentially live in the middle of Valenwood's jungles, with 4 known clans, the Barkbite clan, the Darkfern clan, the Drublock clan and the Lugarsh clan, all living around the middle of Valenwood. Now, there's another very interesting tradition that the Wood Orcs have, as far as I'm aware that's unique to them. You see, the Wood Orcs have a tradition where they may be beaten in battle, but as a clan they may never be defeated. If a clan is truly defeated by another race of Tamriel, then it brings shame upon all Wood Orc people. A really interesting example here is that when after the Alessian slave rebellion drove some Ayleids out of Cyrodiil, those Ayleids absolutely exterminated one clan of Wood Orcs, and to this day many Wood Orcs see this as a point of ultimate shame, and they wear the war paint in the colors of that defeated clan in order to regain the honor of their race by taking revenge in their name and thus washing off the shame that they brought upon all the Wood Orcs, which is pretty interesting. Now, that's about all I can say about the Wood Orcs, but before I end this video, allow me to quickly thank Chip Theory Games, the people who in collaboration with Bethesda made the Betrayal of the Second Era board game, which I mentioned earlier. They sent me the game for free to scour it for all of the lore, so I could give you guys some of the game's lore. And they also allowed me to ask their writers a lot of lore questions, and they've been really nice in general to me. They didn't force me to make any videos or told me to recommend the game or anything like that, but as I've said in any video that touches on this board game, I can highly recommend you check it out if you're a fan of board games and a fan of Elder Scrolls. You can play it both solo and with friends, and both the base game and the Valenwood expansion, which are out now, both have interesting stories that I can really recommend that you play. So I will leave a link to the game's website in the description. I also covered the story and the lore of the main game, including some other topics that touched on the game before on the channel, and I will leave links to those in the description as well. Alright, now I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new about the Elder Scrolls universe today. And if you did, why not leave a like, as that's how the mighty YouTube algorithm decides what content is worthy and what content is unworthy.